Uh, Hello, everyone. I am Hodlon. I am here from PSE, or I work at PSE, Privacy Scaling Explorations, where we work on privacy tools, building using cryptography. We build everything from protocols and all the way to end user applications. And I also dabble in DAOs and DAO governance. The lens that I am speaking through is not purely a technical one. I will dive into the technicals a little bit throughout this talk, but for the most part, I'm interested to have more of a product background, and I'm more interested in how kind of these applications affect people in their day-to-day and how we can kind of utilize them. So what I'm presenting here is a DAO model. And my intention is with this model is to share it and for there to be collaboration around the concepts and the ideas. There's a link at the very end where I kind of have everything that I'll speak about today in a HackMD that's open for comments and whatnot. Going to be some of the solutions that I talk about, because I'm going to be talking about a lot of different tools. This is a non-comprehensive list of solutions and tools. These are just things that are in my orbit, things that I am familiar with and that I want to share. But I'm also curious to understand and know what tools other people might know to be a solution. A lot of this is theoretical, but at the same time, a lot of these things are in existence. It's just a matter of putting them into different combinations. Some of these tools are combinations of other tools in and of themselves, and I'm interested in exploring ways that they can further be put together. And I also, where I could, put links to the things that I'm talking about in the slideshow, which I believe will be shared afterwards. At the end, we're going to have an open discussion or a Q&A where we can talk further and answer questions. But yeah, we're going to talk about the why, what the model is, and about the tools. Okay, so somebody asked me recently, somebody proposed to the group recently, maybe out of some existential dread, from a place of existential dread. They're like, what if Trump wins in the fall? And scary thought to a lot of people. I don't want to be alarmist in any way, but a lot of a lot of the model that I think from is worst case scenarios, and that is infused throughout this talk. So while it's fun and interesting to be doing a lot of the DAO exploration with consensus and using a lot of these tools, I like to highlight when I can worst case scenarios and building for worst case scenarios. So I'm going to go over really quick what there is to be worried about. Okay, so in 2023, the federal government subpoenaed PayPal data on activists who were Thought Cop City. Basically, the Atlanta police was trying to clear cut a whole bunch of forests to build a training ground where they're further militarizing their police. People were opposed to this, and so their PayPal data of these organizers were subpoenaed. These were organizers who were like reimbursing each other for gas costs and COVID tests and stuff like that. And there was a militarized SWAT raid that was conducted where a bail fund organizer And these people were put into the system. And this was like on the eve of a very important vote that was happening on the local, their local city commissioners. So that's one example where something like financial data was used, the state using financial data against protesters. This is an example in Italy. In Italy, there was a proposed, this is the end of 2022, there was a law that was proposed that would limit gatherings of more than 50 people. And ostensibly it was called the anti-rave bill, because supposedly their concern were people who danced and liked to dance, play music. The bill ended up passing with a lot of changes, so it wasn't quite as bad, but still is included a lot of very broad language about what type of gatherings were considered illegal and could be cracked down on by the government. So that is an example of kind of more of a slide towards authoritarianism or fascism, and activists criticize this law to be kind of anti-democratic and the opportunity for the state to lay down the hammer if anybody is gathering for any reason. In 2020, in Portland, Oregon, the federal government ended up sending in the DHS, the US Marshals, and Customs and Border Protection, all federal agencies, also ostensibly to protect federal property. There are documented cases of federal agents in unmarked vehicles kidnapping people off of the street. So that picture on the top is video taken from a video of that actually happening. And they would take them for no reason and then end up releasing them as kind of scare tactics. And then there was also documented instances of the FBI doing door knocks, trying to collect intelligence, trying to get people to like flip on their friends and give up information. And this is, you know, anybody who is associated, right, with speaking out and standing up against the government ended up in these crosshairs. So what we can see is that the threat model, I'm kind of setting up a threat model here of being a state actor threat model. And I could do a whole presentation on threat models in general, but this is kind of the highest that we talk about when we talk about having a state entity within your model, kind of the highest risk. And you can see from these examples that even something like providing aid to activists will get you on lists, will get you kind of involved with this. And that is a dangerous thing. Instances where even using synonymous identities with the tools that we have, like Signal or Discord, there's still a liability. So again, we're looking at worst case scenarios here. So the goals of this model, or kind of how this model is designed, is through imagining a mutual aid group who wants to source some funds and then buy a pizza, say for an activist. You can see this Antifa here sitting around the table eating a pizza. So like what kind of coordination solutions can we come up with in kind of a like privacy max it? So how can we take the most hardened, cryptographically strong privacy tools, put them all together into a solution that can be, again, not theoretically used, but theoretically used right now. And this is also, we're also imagining a DAO or an organization, people coming together to coordinate that might not even know each other or need to know each other, each other's identities, or have met in person at all. Oh, fade in. Okay, so this is the problem statement that to kind of orient us is, how do we create a hardened, private, capture-resistant organization using cryptography? And there's some baseline requirements that I laid out for this. So non-crypto native people, so it's easy for anybody, whether they've used a blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum, anything before, any kind of cryptography, PGP, whether they've used that before or not, that this type of solution would be easy for them to use, to just jump on board and use. It exists outside the system, meaning there isn't any incorporating as traditional companies, LLCs, nonprofits, or anything, and not using any KYC services. Also, I consider this not using any trusted servers. So an example, any service, any Web2 service where you need an email address to log in or a phone number to log in. They store that on their servers, and consider that inside the system for this purpose. And then lastly, the actions. So either making decisions or spending money, which is an important one. Those are all cryptographically provable. So again, not needing to know each other and being able to create trust, create a layer of trust using cryptography, so that the organizing and coordinating, all that energy can go into other places. So this is what we're going to be going through. This is kind of a breakdown of what a DAO, what an organization, an on-chain organization looks like from end to end, kind of all the different components of it. So the validation with accounts, and I'll just go over this briefly because we're going to be diving into each one of these, but from validation to having the accounts, to assigning roles within the organization, to creating reputation, having a way to coordinate and discuss within the organization, coming to consensus on things, communicating outwardly about those decisions or anything else about your mission, and then the treasury, managing a treasury and spending funds. Okay. Does anybody have any questions so far before we dive into these specific, all of these specific components? Thumbs down. Great. Okay. Validation. So validation is login. How do you log in? How do you validate some credentials to give yourself an account that is essentially into the world of this digital world? Passkeys are a really interesting development recently that has kind of optimized the user experience of a lot of things, like even just Web2 passwords. You might be seeing that you've been prompted a lot recently to create a passkey. They're better in a lot, if not most ways than traditional passwords. It uses public key cryptography, which is very cool. You essentially have the private key on your device and the public key on the server of whatever service you are using. That's all they have is your public key, not your password, not a hash of your password or anything like that. So you're essentially just creating signatures with your private key to prove that you are the owner of that public key and able to sign into things. So this has come into play recently with account abstraction and smart wallets on Ethereum. It replaces the need for managing seed phrases. You can do client-side signing, so you can sign directly from your browser, and just reduces a lot of the complexity of that first step of signing up for a like creating a wallet. The user experience in general. So passkeys makes a better user experience, but I included user experience on here too. And this probably applies to most all of these, but especially for the onboarding part, the onboarding part, is that the more designers, you know, UX, UI, system designers, all of that, that we get in the space, the better it's going to be for everyone. It's not just enough that things work, but it's really important to design them in a way that makes it simple and easy for people to use. Otherwise, they're just going to keep using Web 2 services. So really quick, oh yeah, there's a little fun fact down at the bottom. So 5% of the world's population owns crypto, and 0.03% of the world population has ever like dabbled in a DAO or is active in a DAO. That just gives you an idea of kind of the landscape when we're talking about creating, say, an organization that does something that's not specifically in blockchain or Ethereum ecosystem, that wants to do things out in the real world, keeping in mind that very few people have even heard of a DAO before. These are two solutions. The OEC wallet is built on ICP, I believe, but it is specifically optimizes using passkeys to manage wallets. And then P256 wallet is another one using biometrics to create wallets, and all that happens in the browser. Okay. Next, we'll talk about accounts. So when you talk about accounts, the first and foremost, we're talking about Sybil resistance. So Sybil resistance is one of the, I would say, one of the biggest pain points and maybe holy grails to solve when we're talking about coordinating on chain and online. Because especially when it comes to like quadratic funding, voting in general, is knowing that one account is one person, and that one person isn't gaming the system, can't game the system by creating a whole bunch of accounts. And to bring this back to like the DAO model, this is important not because we need to know who exactly the person is. Like that's actually not important at all to know who they are, but just that they are a person and that it is one person. So I think that's important distinction as well. And traditionally, with traditional Sybil resistance solutions rely on an authority, a trusted authority. So, for example, some service that collects your government ID, and then another party asks that service, can you validate this person? Is this person who they say they are? And they're sitting there with their server, they're looking at it and they're saying, yes, with whatever authority you're giving me, I say that this person is who they are. And that's just inefficient and insufficient for 2024 to be relying on central authorities for valuable information like personal identifying information. So a couple, oh yeah, there you see the dog there gaming. So it's a nice little, on the internet, dogs on the internet, who knows? So a couple of solutions, Sysmo uses zero knowledge proofs. you could create an ETH account, and essentially you have a vault where you can validate your Telegram account, your GitHub, your Twitter, some of these services, and then create zero knowledge proofs with that. Sysmo allows you to create these zero knowledge proofs that prove that you have a Twitter account, that you have an active GitHub, all of that. To kind of show it's kind of a proof of work or proof of existence on chain. Same with Gitcoin Passport, although there's less privacy tools on Gitcoin, or yeah, less privacy built in, but I believe they're working on that. And this one is interesting. Anon Adhar is a Indian. So the Adhar is a system in India by which everybody has a government ID and is able to validate with that ID. They have a unique identifying number. What Anon Adhar, which is a PSE project, is able to do is to then zero knowledgeify those identities. So I think this is really interesting in that there could be an authority such as a government agency, but that it's possible to then create zero knowledge proofs to be able to say, yes, I am a citizen of India. You don't need to know, and that's all you need to know. You don't need to know my name, my age, anything like that, where I live, anything like that, because this zero knowledge proof proves that the government gave me this identification. And then I just want to say also, this is also really important in the context of this DAO, where you don't know anybody. You really want to know that somebody isn't trying to get inside of your organization and wreak havoc, which is easy to do if you don't have, or take it over, capture it, which is easy to do if you don't have any sort of civil resistance. Okay, next let's talk about roles. So can't talk about roles without talking about hats. Hats protocol is that screenshot on the bottom left is an actual picture of a hats tree, a visual representation of it. It shapes the organization, quite literally shapes the organization. It describes what the roles are. It has the roles where they are in kind of a tree or a hierarchy, and then who has those roles. So it's really like most importantly, like who is within this organization, who is within this group, and who is outside of it. If you have a hat in the organization, you're in it. If you don't, then you are not in that organization. This kind of tree system also helps delegation, to be able to delegate roles, delegate responsibilities, and delegate within the organization who does what. What's also really cool about hats is that it's on chain and it's programmable. So you can use this for permissioning, to control permissions for certain things. Farcaster is an example of this, to have like a shared Farcaster delegated account, which we'll be talking about a little later. You can also use these to gate, whether it's access to a Charmverse, to gate within voting protocols, such as Macy, which we'll be talking about. But you can say that only people, I have an app and only people wearing this specific hat are allowed to interact with it. It's a lot of kind of the if this, then that logic. Something that I think is really interesting about hats is at the top here, it's called the top hat, is kind of the one hat that it owns or is in control of the entire organization. This could be one person or a group of people. And that's what's kind of fascinating, is like this hat could be in the control of, say, a multi-sig that is controlled by the entire organization. So it allows the organization to, in itself, own itself. and have complete control over itself, which I think is very interesting and very cool. So Semaphore is, I want to mention Semaphore really quick. Semaphore is a way to, this is also a PSC project, and this is a way, Semaphore allows the creation of groups on chain that then allows you to take actions within that group. It's very similar to Hats in some regards. And I'm actually exploring a solution that would incorporate Hats and Semaphore together. And what that essentially would do would allow for a group with hats, like a hats tree for that group, to then enter into a Semaphore group, which would essentially anonymize all of the actions that are being taken by those hats members. So you can see it as kind of an anonymization layer of the hats protocol. Or as another way to look at it would be as I refer to it as tornado hats. So in the same way that Tornado Cash kind of is an obfuscation layer or an anonymity layer where you put money in and then you don't know what the money that's coming out, the ETH that's coming out, who put it in. Semaphore kind of acts in a similar way where you can see people with hats joining the group, and then you can see actions coming out of that Semaphore group, but you don't actually know who took what action. But at the same time, it's provable, cryptographically provable. All right, let's talk about reputation. So early iterations of DAOs use market-based tokens, what I like to call market-based tokens, where you have a number of tokens that you create and distribute to your community. They're on the open market. They have a price that fluctuates. You can buy and you can sell them. And basically, the more tokens you own, the more power that you have within that DAO is kind of a 1-to-1 ratio. More recently, groups have been exploring reputation tokens. So these are tokens that are non-transferable. They have no inherent market value. They are given by the organization, and you can't trade them. They can only be moved or taken back by that organization or by the smart contract with which that organization controls. And so the idea of building reputation within your organization is that you can balance out the people who are putting in more work or higher quality work, have an equal, I guess, a more equal amount of say in the decisions of that organization. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of tweak this as well. Once you are able to distribute these tokens, one group doing that is Optimism Fractal. They have developed a consensus game that distributes reputation tokens called the Respect Game. And essentially, you have a group, in a nutshell, you have a group of 6 people, and that group meets on a regular basis and shares every week. The 6 people in that group share what they did to contribute to whatever the mission of that organization is, or whatever it is that you are trying to accomplish. And then all of the members of that group of 6 rank each other on who they believe gave the highest, contributed the most that last week to the organization. So everybody ranks each other, agrees on those rankings, comes to consensus on every single one of those ranks, and then there is a weighted number of respect tokens that are distributed, starting the top. The person who everybody thought did the most that week gets the most respect tokens, and then all the way down to the 6th person, which I think gets like 0 or just a couple tokens. And the idea is that when you run this game for long enough, then you get a fairly even equal distribution across the organization of whoever has been contributing the most. It's a very interesting concept. The game is run every week. It's open, you can join it. You just want to go check out and see how it's run. You just jump in there and do it. It's a very great community for exploring this type of stuff. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting for me to see different ways that they've been solving for these the distribution of the reputation tokens. Another organization is actually the DAO that manages HAT's protocol. They are also experimenting with reputation tokens. They have a more, at this moment, like a more kind of centralized way of doing that. But again, excited to see how reputation tokens in general evolve over the coming months and years in the DAO space. Okay. Let's talk about a forum. So when I say forum, I'm talking about internal communication. Something like Discord is what's used now, but Discord is used very often. Discord and Telegram and Signal are used often for groups to have private chats and servers and rooms where they can coordinate with each other and talk. Because those are in some form or another trusted systems, either your phone number, your email address, your IP address, all of that is being, you have to trust that the service that is hosting these tools are not going to sell that data or give that data away. So the thought experiment is, how do you coordinate among yourself and maintain privacy and maintain your data? And this is an application that was also developed within PSE called Discreetly that kind of took this to the max, and it allows to have gated chats. So you can allow groups of people in and exclude whoever you want. So you can have private chats. It's all completely anonymous. There are no usernames. There's just you create your public key when you come in, and then it uses semaphore for the grouping, and then uses RLN, which is another project within PSE, to do rate limiting for spam prevention. So this is a really interesting, just the kind of the concept of you don't need to have you don't need to give up your telephone number. You don't need to have a username. What if this organization where we don't even need to know each other, we just need to trust that we're acting in good faith, we can come together and coordinate privately with cryptography, not have to worry about being sold out. Okay, consensus. So Macy is also a PSE project. Macy stands for Minimal Anti-Collusion Infrastructure. This is a way Macy allows for, well, backing up, first of all, coming to consensus. Before I talk about the tools, coming to consensus is actually the most kind of one of the central, most important things in an organization, which is how as a group do we make decisions? How do we go from having an idea, to proposing that idea and to everyone, discussing it maybe, and then executing on it. And that's, there's a spectrum of you have one or a small group of people making decisions for many, for the whole group, or you can have many people coming together to make one decision. The using a quadratic formula, there are also many others because the quadratic isn't the only one, but it's the one that's used most common. Having a quadratic formula in order to essentially allow for a more even distribution of say. So, for example, if we have the reputation system we're talking about, and in this DAO, I have a lot of reputation, but I am just one person. And there are 10 other people, maybe with not as much reputation, maybe with very little, but they have, those 10 people have using a quadratic formula, will be able to have their voices heard more, even though they have less reputation, because there's more of them kind of, say, voting the opposite way as me. It evens out that say. And so it's really interesting. You can kind of see, like, it's not who has the most money, and it's not it's not the one person that has the most money, and it's not the necessarily who has all the votes, but it's kind of a combination of those. So Macy is an anti-collusion protocol. And what makes it anti-collusion is that there is no real way to prove who you voted for after you've voted. So if you want to bribe me, you can, but there's no actual way for me to prove that I voted for you if you're trying to bribe for me to vote in the way that you want me to. I can share my keys with you that way, but then it's possible for me to then take those, nullify my vote, and vote for somebody else as well. So that is the anti-collusion component of it. And it's built, there are solutions like Snapshot, which I would say are very lightweight, and Macy is kind of the more on the heavy duty side of consensus mechanisms. Looking at time here, right towards the end. So really quickly, communication. So the communication is talking about outward communication. I have here ActivityPub. If you've ever heard of ActivityPub, is kind of a standard that allows different protocols, different federated, decentralized protocols to talk with each other, and for people to talk to each other through them. And this is kind of the moving outside of the walled garden paradigm that we've been living in with Facebook and Twitter into a more open, decentralized way of communicating. And so in these systems, you own your own data to a sense, but more importantly, the algorithms that are used are not all encompassing to the entire network. You have an underlying protocol layer that does very simple, basic things, like sending messages back and forth, replying, all of that. And then you have clients that are built on top, and those clients can be tweaked, can tweak algorithms, and those clients can decide what is shown and what is not shown. But the underlying actual data is still there, and you can port it over anywhere else. You are not within the walled garden of Facebook or Twitter or any of those other Web 2 experiences. So the example for this, so Farcaster is built on Ethereum, on Optimism. It is federated, it has nodes. There's a bunch of clients, it all acts like that. There is a application that HATS protocol built that allows for delegated casting. So that means that using HATS protocol, you can have a group of people and you can share an account and allow anybody to post from that account, remove that permission if that person leaves the organization or whatever. It makes it very easy. But this is a very cool feature that came recently and is very relevant to this DAO model, where you can actually delegate a number of people, whether it's like your communications, the communications group, or everyone in the organization, the group. to be able to communicate outwardly without having to share passwords, without having it just be one person that owns the account. Last but not least, the treasury. So these both railgun and privacy pools are solutions that are similar to Tornado Cash. They kind of around the same time and kind of continue on after Tornado Cash has fallen out of style. This is a way for funds to be held on chain, stable coins or Ethereum or whatnot, to be held on chain, but to be private. So it's you can send within these groups. You can send money, and you can send money outside of the group or outside of the pool, so to speak, the anonymity pool, and not see kind of where those funds came from. So how this would work, what I was really interested in solving for is bridging this this gap between on-chain and off-chain actions. So in this example, let's say there is a vote by the DAO, by the organization, to buy a pizza. We're coming back around to the pizza party, to buy a pizza, but the pizza shop does not take ETH. They don't care about ETH. They just want to sell their pizzas, pay their bills, go home to their families. That's totally fine. So there's a vote on-chain within the DAO signals this action. So the treasury would then kind of earmark these funds and say, okay, we're going to spend $100 buying pizza for a pizza party. Somebody could walk down to their local pizza joint with their credit card, with cash, however they want. They could buy the pizzas, and then with a tool called ZK Email, that's what this logo is here, is for ZK Email. ZK Email is then able to prove that that money was spent on those pizzas, thus kind of bringing that notarization, that proof, back on chain, and then verifying back to the protocol, yes, these funds were spent, release them. That person that paid for the pizzas then receives on-chain funds. And yeah, there has been a bridge made between on-chain and off-chain actions. Very cool. Okay, so in conclusion, we can see that creating a fully private on-chain organization is not only possible, but it might actually be necessary in the future for us to get through these years, these hard years where authoritarianism may be on the rise. So I want to invite you to collaborate. This QR code goes to the HackMD document that I mentioned at the beginning, where a lot of these things are discussed. I add to that periodically, encourage you to add to it and make comments as well. But in the very least, I invite you to think about privacy in your own systems, in your own DAOs, in your own models, and the own tools that you're building. And maybe think of just small ways where you can create more resilience in your organizations through privacy. Thank you.
Thank you. That was amazing. Does anybody have any questions or any follow-ups for Hodlon?
Thanks, Hodlon. That was so dead on for this theme. I am curious about two questions about viability. Sorry, I missed like the first 10 minutes, and maybe you might have covered this a bit, but two questions about viability of just like this broad viability of the stack. I know some of the stuff is like, completely unproblematic. Some of it might be a little bit more. But in terms of like the chance of getting, starting with the car here, the chance of getting getting your wallet blacklisted, for example, but from touching any of these protocols. So just like in terms of legal enforcement, especially given like, potential authoritarian atmospheres. But then also just from a UX perspective, like how far off are we before, an activist organization is able to effectively use this and cover their asses enough that they're not like, faltering the whole way, and like actually using sort of the end-to-end, like this full stack effectively, since I know you're like a UX and UI like specialist.
Yeah, I think that the possibility that all of these things could be incorporated together into like one portal, one solution, is we're kind of right on the cusp of that. That was kind of my intention with designing this model and doing this presentation, and having this HackMD, is to say, look, here are all of these pieces, and they're so close to each other. They just need to be put together, to have a solution made that would be easy for a group to just jump on and use. So I would say probably closer than further away. And again, I would love to see this implemented in some form. That's why I'm talking about it. And then to your other question, go back to these privacy pools, Railgun, and then Tornado Cash themselves, you always risk, whenever you associate funds with these tools, with these contracts, I guess, on chain, you always risk being marked, right? And not being able to, like, say, cash out on a centralized exchange. There are solutions that are being developed to that, but it's kind of a complex problem. So there's proof of innocence solutions where you can essentially say, you can essentially prove that you are not a part of a group. So if there's a group of, say, North Korean hackers, you can create a proof that says, I am not a North Korean hacker. These funds are private and they remain private. And I can prove to you, yeah, backwards KYC. I can also prove to you that they're not associated with that, but I don't need to like tell you exactly where they came from. So I can maintain my privacy while still proving to an exchange or the government that I'm not a North Korean hacker. And these are solutions that are being developed now. Again, it's a very difficult solution, but
just real quick, do you think that like, just use the phrase like that flies in court? Like in like in other words, like is like ZK snark and this sort of like, is this legible enough that that like law enforcement would actually like honor this as a legitimate proof of proof of innocence?
No, where we're at right now is just getting the technology made, and then the next step is like getting legitimacy to it. So we're still in the kind of like, can we do this? Yes, we can do this. Let's implement these things and show that we are trying to do the right thing while still maintaining privacy. But yeah, if your funds are frozen by an exchange, they can do that for whatever reasons they want. So that's a risk you take anytime you send funds to an exchange. And maybe I can also plug, local regenerative currencies and ecosystems, right? Hand raised for lab ratting.
Yeah, we'll be your lab rat. I've got a whole community down here in Costa Rica. We're dealing with it. I love what you're doing. And actually, Christina told me that you and I should probably talk, because there is a lot of, we're doing a lot of like the groundwork down here. And we're actually dealing with an issue right now. I'm like, can you call the Thank Arbitrum Foundation and work with them with their KYC, because I'm fighting Fractal ID right now in terms of getting grants, money to be distributed to NGOs. And I'm like, where were you in my conversation yesterday? But we have some really interesting like community dynamics, IRL community dynamics, where I am down here in Costa Rica. And last week, another one was actually brought to my attention. We have a lot of illegal building going on and a lot of concerned citizens and residents that feel completely disempowered and disenfranchised from it. And one of our members was like, yeah, this is great and all, but like organizing, but like, what do we do with the Russian mob that's bringing these funds in? Like, no one wants to get their throats slit. And I'm like, oh, this just got really real. So I see, you know, these are great tools to be able to reach consensus, because the more that we can get our communities using these things and voicing their opinion, it's like there's strength in those numbers, I hope. But there is a lot of fear down here, not just from institutional retaliation, but also these social groups. And, you know, Costa Rica is like a hotbed for like drug money and like money laundering, from what we're told, even though I've never met a single person that's ever had an issue with it. Because we receive so much funding from the United States, the banks really have a stranglehold on capital here.
Yeah, I think that you said empowerment, like the communities feeling disenfranchised, and I think that that's exactly kind of the purpose of this, or what I hope to get across, or what I would hope a tool or solution like this would do, which is to empower communities, whether it's small groups or larger groups, to be able to do things without fear of, again, like you talked about the mob, right? I talked about state level threats, the threat model, but that includes corporations, that includes the mob, that includes organized crime, that includes any group that is, you know, trying to do you harm. How can you safely organize and protect your community, and create defensive using technology in a way that is defensive, and to keep people safe. And that's kind of at the heart of what I'm proposing and hoping to build here. But yeah, let's connect after this. If Christina, you want to connect us on Telegram or anything, I would love to continue the conversation with you.
Awesome. I don't know how much time you have, Hodlon, but if anybody else has any more questions. Do you have a few more minutes, or?
I have a few minutes if anyone has questions, yeah.
I just have like a general one. I've been very like loosely following DarkFi, and I saw they posted recently something about anonymous DAOs. I didn't really get into the weeds of it, but interested to hear if you have any thoughts on that, or, you know.
DarkFi, no, I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with it, but I'm curious. It sounds like it is. It sounds like it is similar or adjacent to kind of the ideas that I'm talking about.
Yeah, they just recently, I think, what did they do? They posted something on, yeah, fully anonymous DAOs. It's like Amir Taki's new project.
Cool.
Are you familiar with Amir Taki, Hodlon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. Cool. I'm looking at it right now. Cool. Yeah. What is there anything, Josh, that you learned, or any kind of like connection to what I was talking about, or is it just something that you saw and were curious about?
Yeah, more so the latter, but they just kind of posted something on, yeah, like fully anonymous DAOs, and yeah, didn't get as much into the weeds of it as I said, but just interested to hear your take on it and kind of differences between what you've been thinking about.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of what I was talking about at the very end, where I mean, this is for privacy in general, right? Like I like to instill the idea and remind people that like the complacency of, you know, well, I don't really need something to be super private, so we're not going to like spend the time or the resources to like incorporate these things. But it's always good to think about worst case scenarios. It's always good to think about, you know, creating a hardened system that might survive or thrive in a lot of different types of environments. And for most things, it's like really not gonna matter. But for other things, like Van Keen was talking about, where like, oh, I never thought I would have to like protect my well-being and my life, right? And then people find themselves in situations where actually they do. Um, and that's why I think it's important, like the work at PSC that we're doing, and like Dark Fi is really interesting. Just kind of like we're not bad guys, so to speak, right? But like privacy is incredibly important. Is incredibly important to have and protect, because you never know when you're going to need it. It's a cliche, but it's one of those things that you don't need until you need it.
Totally. I guess maybe one last thing is, and not to put you too much on the spot, but like I personally have struggled and not been super successful communicating just a lot of what you just talked about today to people who are not familiar with crypto and even are like, yeah, again, against it in some ways, or think they're against it in some ways. How would you like want to try poking at like some kind of elevator pitch or like short thing without all of the kind of terminology that you were using earlier? Or is that, yeah.
Yeah, I think of I'm thinking of this was maybe Facebook, early Facebook era, where there were drag queens that were joining Facebook with their drag names because it's how they identified, and Facebook was taking down their accounts. And at that point, it was like Facebook was just becoming kind of like the go-to place. Like it was just on the cusp of like you know, being important. Like it was in an important town square, so to speak, where people were connecting with each other, and it actually negatively affected these people who were building networks on there, building the network on there, to have it taken down because Facebook arbitrarily decided that that's what they, you know, that they couldn't do that for whatever reason, right? Facebook ended up going back on that, right? But that's an example of where a lot of the systems that we're using today, we are building our connections and our network within their system, and they can change that anytime they want. It's completely arbitrary. They can decide whether you even have an account or not, right? And so I think bringing it back to, you know, knowing your audience and bringing it back to not just like not just not just like, oh yeah, you know, cryptocurrency is going to change the world, Ethereum, blah blah blah, but kind of like bringing it back to a very tactile you know, experience that they might have of like, what if you went to log on to Facebook to talk to your relatives, and Facebook decided that that for whatever reason, like they weren't going to show you that anymore, that you didn't have an account anymore. You have no recourse. And so a lot of these systems that we're talking about, you know, Ethereum and cryptocurrency is one of them, but like distributed systems in general, kind of outsource that and take that social graph and take those things and move them outside of any one centralized entity that it arguably do a lot. Like they have a big task to like make sure everybody stays safe on the platform. But what these decentralized technologies are doing is kind of putting that responsibility back on the clients that we're building, back on people's own individual, like how they choose to engage. which is more work, but ultimately more reward in the end. So I think that to answer your question, like the examples of like centralized services are fine 99% of the time until they're not, until they decide what to do with your social graph, your data, everything that you've done on them. And even then, people might not care, right? Like most people don't care. They still use Facebook, they still use those services. But bringing it back to like real examples where like, yeah, this could actually happen to you and it really sucks. And nobody wants that. You don't want that. I don't want that for you. But there are alternative systems that are being created to empower you.
We are currently shadow banned on Facebook right now, and we can't syndicate any of our information. And I love it because I'm like, oh boy, like here we go, like here comes the fight. And this is just proof that we need these alternative systems that you're talking about. I also have several other members who are shadow banned. One of our members has a brewery here, and we can't figure out which competitor, but one of his competitors keeps reporting him, and he lost an account with a couple thousand followers, and that was his livelihood. And in fact, I brought the attention to him because I noticed some of our shared posts were gone. And so not only did it hurt me, but anytime you collaborate with someone, like it really impacts each individual node on those social graphs. And I just think that it's horribly irresponsible. And I've worked a lot in the marketing world, like getting to know these pain points. And I have found the only way for me to get anything reinstated is I tell Meta that I want to pay them money.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to socially engineer it. Like you have to be like, oh, I'm trying to pay you money. Who can I talk to so I can shut up and you can take my money? And that usually gets things fixed. A little less with the bans now, but it's ridiculous that there's no recourse for it. And then they just don't understand how it impacts the little guy.
Yeah. And that's a really good observation, a really good point of like pointing out to people that looking at the big picture, zooming out, like a lot of these services that are fast and easy to use that we all use, their underlying model and motivation at the end of the day is to make money. They do not care about you. They do not care about society, regardless of what they might think they believe. And so using tools and building in the systems that are open and are public goods. And at the end of the day, the purpose is not to make money. Their purpose is to actually make this world a better place. There's kind of a very clear case to be made there. And like it's very hard to argue that Facebook actually thinks that they are doing good for society. I believe that Elon Musk believes he is. I believe that Mark Zuckerberg believes he is. I know that they believe they are, but like that's objectively, in my opinion, not the case. And so building in open systems that are public good, like, yes, let's do that. It's so much better.
Cool. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? Do you have anything closing, Hodlon?
No, I appreciate you all coming, and thank you all for hearing this. It was a pleasure. I am looking forward to the future. I am generally optimistic, and I see a lot of very cool things, very interesting things being built to empower people. and in contrast with exploitation and authoritarianism. I encourage you all to keep an eye out for those things and to support those things as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for your work. It's extremely important. All right, thanks for joining, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.